Okay, now that we've got that sorted out, our little echo. I will go ahead and call the April 22nd, 2019 meeting of the Stillwater City Council to order and ask you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we're going to start off tonight with a proclamation, and I think Deanne McKeever and is it your son Max can come up and join us for this. I will read this proclamation, then we'll talk a little bit about Lemonade Day. We all are, bud. All right. Whereas Lemonade Day is good for kids, good for business, and good for Stillwater, the Stillwater Chamber of Commerce, Startup Stillwater, Simmons Bank, and Stillwater Medical Center, along with many other companies and organizations, are joining forces to bring this entrepreneurial program to Stillwater. And whereas Lemonade Day is a free program dedicated to teaching children how to start, own, and operate their own business through the simple and time-honored act of building and running a lemonade stand. And whereas Lemonade Day provides youth with free materials, support thanks to our local sponsors. The young entrepreneurs who participate in the program earn money and are taught to spend a little, save a little, and share a little, donating a portion of their profits to any local charity of their choice. And whereas Lemonade Day is a day of learning and celebrating Stillwater's future. On May 4th, every citizen has a job, either buying or helping children sell lemonade. The citizens of Stillwater are encouraged to simply purchase a cup of lemonade from one of the youth participating in the program to demonstrate how our community cares for their future. And whereas the City of Stillwater salutes and commends the sponsors, organizers, and participants of this program and extends best wishes for a successful and rewarding observance. Now, therefore, I, William Joyce, Mayor of the City of Stillwater, hereby proclaim May 4th, 2019 as Lemonade Day in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Okay.
This sounds like a great program. Can you tell us a little bit about it, Deanne?
It is. Really, just like you said, it's a program that is designed to teach youth entrepreneurship, just kind of plant that seed. And you do that via a lemonade stand that just teaches them to own and operate their business. The core philosophy with Lemonade Day is, teaching them goal setting, financial literacy, responsibility, teamwork, and philanthropy. So I think it's going to be great for Stillwater. It's in, I think, 33 states. We're the first one in Oklahoma. So we make 34 states and 77 cities across the U.S. And then there's a few international cities that host Lemonade Day. So I think it's going to be awesome for us to have.
How many lemonade stands will we have?
We have about 100 participants, so I think probably 50 to 75, depending on how they split up. We do encourage, siblings to team up and friends. So.
Excellent. Max, are you going to run one? Are you going to run a lemonade stand?
Yes, sir.
Do you know where it's going to be?
At Lowe's.
At Lowe's?
Okay.
All right, that's a good spot.
Can you ask
It's
us to
gonna be
come buy
busy on a
some
Saturday.
lemonade from you?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I certainly do hope that everyone in Stillwater gets a chance to go out and buy some lemonade from one of our young
Absolutely.
entrepreneurs in town.
Thank
you
you.
for your work.
Ready?
Bring this down to you, Dan. Good luck. All right, that takes us to the consent docket. Counselors, questions, comments, or motions regarding the consent docket?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. We will jump down now to general orders. Item 7A, update. Oh, you know what? This isn't a public hearing, so I do have a speaker on public comment on agenda items not scheduled for public hearing. Just have one person sign up tonight. That's Chris Peters. Mr. Peters, please let us know what you think.
I was really hoping the echo stayed so I could do some beatboxing for you, but it's not going to work out. Okay, Chris Peters, 1116 West Thomas. Today we're going to be talking about some transportation projects. Looking through the plan, I'm going to get right to the meat of it right in front. The request that the City Council goes with option 3 of staff's recommendation for the 5-year transportation plan. I have issues with the capital streets plan. I have no issues with the pavement management plan or the alternative transportation plan. It's wonderful that alternative transportation is being considered in the 5-year plan. This is probably the most amount of money spent on active transportation in Stillwater for a long time. That is encouraging. However, I believe this 5-year plan is 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Here's why. We get what we pay for. Our transportation spending choices prioritize vehicular traffic 2-to-1 over active transportation. It's proposed to spend $6 million to widen Sanger to 4 lanes, but only spend $200,000 on 1 safe route to Sanger schools. BPAC was also not involved in the actual plan of the expansion project. It stated it will include wide paths, but we have not seen or heard any details about that network. We are now left with this 3 minutes to give you our input. So how about we save some money, make Sanger Road a 3-lane road, and continue to work on active transportation school routes to Sanger schools. Encourage more kids to walk and bike while cutting down on the car drop-off traffic. I don't feel we are committed to our multimodal transportation policy if our planning and spending don't prioritize it. I'm echoing the warning we received from the 2005 Puma plan. The more we spend on developing the west side of town, the harder it will be to repair and rebuild this city's core. If we continue to increase the comfort of the automobile on the west side of town, the more homes and businesses will be built there. One reason why our downtown and campus core is in disrepair is because of the western sprawl. We can't undo the suburbs of Stillwater, but we should encourage its growth with bigger roads. More people living in the suburbs will equal more automobiles coming into the city core. Counterintuitive to the Campus Link project. Stillwater has to repair and strengthen its core now if we want a future where active transportation is at minimum equal to motorized vehicles. I believe that this is a moment that Stillwater can become unlike any other city in Oklahoma, where we say no to sprawl in the automobile and we start saying yes to walkability and urban density. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, that takes us down to item 7 under general orders. Item A, update on status of transportation project funding, CC-19-51. Mr. McNichol?
That would be a presentation by Monty Carnes. Excuse me?
I'm first.
You're first. I'm not even looking.
I was going to say that. I'm just not sure that's money.
That's not Monty. So.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Melissa Reams, Chief Financial Officer, here to just update and refresh our memories. It's been about a month since we talked about budget and what monies are being sent towards transportation. So I just wanted to review that with you. In your packet, there was a very high-level overview, and we're going to just drill down for just a few minutes into exactly where the money's going. As we look at transportation, just a few definitions here. Transportation to me is the engineering, project management, and the inspection side of streets, sidewalks, anything cement related. That's what engineering or transportation is. And then public works, we used to call it operations, and it was public works before it was operations. So everything old is new again. Public works, they're the maintenance side. So when a sidewalk is in such disrepair that it needs to be completely taken out and replaced, our guys are going to do that. Our public works guys are going to go in and do that. They do fill the potholes. They go in, they can do some minor cement on roads, so that they're kind of our maintenance staff for roads. Traditionally, these two have been combined when we look at budget numbers because they are so geared towards transportation. We would just combine them into one big number. I've started pulling them out so that we can really look and identify where certain costs are occurring. Project funding comes in from 4 different funds, if you will, or 4 different stages. We have a transportation fee fund, and that was authorized in 2003. It is a fee that is attached to any development or building permit, and it is to help compensate for the damage done to the roads by the developers as they're constructing whatever it is they're working on. That usually brings in, I would say, about $100K in revenue, just depending. And again, it depends on what kind of activity we've got going. And there's about $400,000 sitting in that account right now. Those funds are waiting to be deployed, and they will be used for transportation plan updates and then any appropriate enhancements. The way the ordinance was written, it was to anything that would enhance or expand modes of transportation or ways of transportation. So not necessarily maintenance, but something new. The half-cent sales tax, we all have talked about that. Very, very much aware of that. It was originally voted on in 2001. And it was a 5-year plan at that point. It was renewed in 2006 for 10 years, and then we renewed it again in November of 2015. So it will expire in 2026. Brings in about $4 million a year in revenue. Of course, if we could get our sales tax revenues to grow and go up, its money would go up as well. We have money, and the engineering staff have quite a few, well, they've spent quite a bit of time working with this particular funding. In the past, I think, looking back at the ballots, the questions that were on the ballot that the voters voted on, the original ballot included specific projects. And all of those projects, I went back and looked. To our knowledge, they have been completed. So those original 2001 projects have been completed. 2006 and in 2015, the ballot was more worded such that the projects would be at the discretion of the council. So we would bring forward plans and action items, and with the council's approval, we would move forward with those. When we had our budget reduction back in December of 2016, remember we looked at how much revenue was coming in. We were going to be short, so we transferred pavement management to the half-cent sales tax, and we had to, at that point, put a halt on any additional projects coming out of the general fund. For several years, there had been another allowance or another allotment in the general fund of about $4 million. So in total, between the two, you were getting $8 million in projects per year. Well, when we needed to take a step back and look at what kind of money we had coming in and where it was being spent, that was one of the things that we paused on for a moment. We come back in October of 2018, and you all had approved $6 million in project funding for transportation. We came back to you March study session. You've approved another $3 million for transportation, in addition to $1.5 million that's already included in the capital fund. So $4.5 million next year will be available for capital projects in the transportation fund. Well, transportation fund and general fund. Okay.
$4.5 million in addition
To the $6
the
million.
half-cent sales tax.
Yes. Exactly. Monty, when Monty gives you his presentation, he has some timeline charts that I think will kind of help put this all in perspective. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The money is what happens up front. We can't let contracts, we can't go out for bid until we kind of know what our project is going to cost. We set that money aside. We earmark it so that it doesn't get spent on something else. Then there's a process that goes through design and engineering, and Monty's going to elaborate on that in a little bit. But once you get down to the bid process, that's really when you find out what your project's going to cost. And hopefully what you set aside is going to exceed what those bids come back for. Sometimes it doesn't always work that way. That's why you have some contingency money set aside. So that's kind of the funding there. Okay. We talked about the life cycle and the participants. I'll just kind of reiterate where we've been over the last couple of years. In the fiscal 19 adopted budget, $712,000, almost $713,000 for transportation. And then the operations side of transportation was $2.7 million. So the maintenance dollars were there, the personnel dollars are there, that's where they're housed. The adopted budget in the transportation fee, we estimated $100,000 in revenue. To date, there have been no projects coming out of that. When it earns such little money, and I know $100,000 doesn't really sound like little money, but in the scope of these projects it takes a while. We have to let the money build up so that we can look at a study or a roadway that needs enhancement. Out of the half-cent sales tax in fiscal 19, we projected $4 million in revenue. To date, we've had about $83,000 in expenditures. Again, it's the timing of things and getting those bids let. Added the $6 million to the transportation projects back in October. The proposed budget includes the $4.5 million that we just talked about for transportation projects and stormwater. Again, $4 million for the half-cent sales tax in fiscal 20, $542,000, $780,000. I think that's coming out of the transportation. No, that's the operating costs for the engineers for transportation. $2.7 million is the operating costs for the operations department or the public works department. And again, the transportation fee fund, $100,000 budgeted for revenue. Really no expenditures budgeted at this time. So between the two fiscal years, we've budgeted and allotted $25 million towards transportation, just in 2 years. I wish that the minute we allotted the money that the road could just miraculously be done, but it doesn't work that way. So, any questions?
Counselors?
Okay, I'm going to turn the mic over to Monty. Oh,
I
I'm
do
sorry.
have a quick one.
Yeah.
The money that we've got set aside, budgeted in 20, fiscal year 20, the additional $4.5 million. What is the outlook on that being sustainable? Do we see that as one-time money right now, or do we think we'll be able to make those types of investments in the future as well?
At this juncture, I would say that is one-time money. Christy and I are going to continue to work on our reserve analysis. That's what gave rise to some of this money. And you were very generous and allotted $3.9 million of existing funds to the citywide capital plan, and that's where the $1.5 million is coming from. That is a topic that we will discuss over the next few months and how we're going to set ourselves up for success. I don't think that any of us want to go backwards on this. We've made a very courageous step, and we've said this is important to our citizens, that we maintain and refresh our assets and keep those at a certain level. And so we're going to work through that process together and with citizen input as well of how we can get this accomplished.
Thank you. The other question I had was just, you mentioned that between 19 and 20, there will be $25 million total of transportation money. But given the project life cycle, we've actually only spent in this fiscal year less than $1 million.
Yes, yes.
So there are 24 plus million dollars
Right.
of transportation projects that are funded
Right.
that we haven't gotten to yet.
We're in the process, probably in the very early stages in the design and engineering phases where we as citizens don't see things going on. And we wonder, that's where the disconnect comes in with the people listening is, well, they allotted the money. Why isn't the crews out there? Why aren't they out there right now working on 3rd Street Bridge and Husband Street Bridge and all these other projects that we've all talked about? There's still right-of-way to be bought. There's still design to be finished, engineering to be done. It just takes time.
Yeah. Do we have a list of those approved projects up somewhere with like a status so that people can go and sort of see?
Let me ask Megan with marketing and civic engagement.
We do have some project pages. So we do have a page on like pavement management and whatnot of projects that are coming up, but we have to have, as more projects come, we ask, to have notifications so that we can make a project page and then update
Yeah.
that with
Could we
funding
maybe
and whatnot.
put something on the city website homepage that has a road sign or something so that you could just click on that
Oh.
and just do a direct link to that? Because I know the pages are wonderful and it's good
They are.
information.
Absolutely.
But you have to kind of,
Yeah, so we
Go
can make,
through a bunch
it'd
of
be
them to get
very
there.
easy to make
Okay.
a quick link right on the front saying transportation projects.
great.
That would go to all,
Okay.
yeah.
thanks.
We started working on that a couple of weeks ago, but it will take some time because of the GIS system.
Okay.
The other question I would have for you is how often would you as a council like to be updated on status of projects? I think this is a great forum. Number one, to keep you informed about where things are. But we could, between our finance department and transportation department, give you dollars and cents as to where we are and what's been spent and where the status of the projects are. Is that something you'd like to see monthly or quarterly? How often? We could start monthly, and if it got to be too onerous, maybe we back off a little bit.
I would expand the question.
Okay,
How often do citizens need to have updates?
that's a good idea, yeah.
And that's probably more frequently than we would imagine.
Okay,
Dollar amounts, I don't know. The numbers are just meaningless, really.
well, and they're so large. It's I deal with them every day, but they are so large, it's just overwhelming sometimes.
Right, I almost glazed over when you were talking.
I
about
know.
it. But to me, it's, as Will asked, what projects are approved? When are they starting?
Mm-hmm,
Did they start on time?
mm-hmm.
Why didn't they start on time? Are they finished? And that you can get that information if you go to here and here and here.
Right, it just needs to be.
One page.
Mhm.
And, I don't know, you don't need to necessarily update us every week or meeting or month if nothing has happened, but
Mhm.
I would certainly like to know when something is approved and gone out to bid or
Okay,
those
Maybe
types
just that real simple breakdown of it's in engineering. It's just kind of those
Right.
3 phases
Those
that you've maybe
milestones,
talked
yeah,
about.
that these
the
projects-
milestones of
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
them done.
yeah. We definitely can do that, and we could put it on consent, and then if you really wanted to talk about something, you could just pull it off, and we could look at it more in depth at that point. All
that'd be
right,
really
well, we
helpful.
will work towards that so
Well,
that
it
we're
would- it
all
would be nice on
informed
the
about what's going on.
transportation website page, too.
Yeah.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
the more accessible. I mean, of course, we want to be updated, so when people ask us, we can kind of have a general
Absolutely. Absolutely.
opportunity to give them information. But it is great to be able to say it's on the website and it's really easily clickable, not 5 clicks in. I think is
Yeah.
important.
And a good
Absolutely.
way to educate the public on how things, that there is a process and there's, we're not just holding on to it and not doing anything. There's
Right.
phases that things have to go through.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anything else?
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll turn it over to Monty.
All right, that's for item 7B, review and approval of transportation projects.
May I ask a question
Yes,
before
ma'am.
Monty starts? Monty, thank you for letting me
You bet.
interrupt you here. You know, I think that I touted this meeting as a study session. And we were informed late last week that it had turned into a regular meeting and that there would be, that as a study session, I did not expect that we would be actually voting on anything.
I agree.
I would prefer not to vote on anything tonight. So,
Actually, we had that discussion last week, and there were some other items absent this that needed to be on for voting. And I think Bonnie made the decision today that he was going to not ask.
Go ahead and jump ahead. We would like to have the fiscal year 19 pavement management plan approved tonight. That helps us with some scheduling and moving forward with some things. The rest of it, I agree. The other 4 years, the pavement management, the 5 year, the capital plan, I have no issues continuing discussion on those. But the fiscal year 19, if you want to delay it till in May, that's fine as well. But it would help us with some items to get those approved if you don't have any problems with them.
okay.
If you've got some issues with them, then we're more than happy to
Okay.
come back and talk about them.
The second half of my comment is, we talk all the time about civic engagement, and we have two groups that I know of who are pretty involved in infrastructure, the Chamber Infrastructure Committee and the BPAC Committee. And it may, neither one of those groups feels like they're fully engaged in this process. And we either want citizen engagement or we don't. And if we don't, we just say we don't. We're going to not have a BPAC committee. We're not going to be involved with the Chamber Infrastructure Group. And then it just is. But if we really do want citizens engaged, we really need to be serious about it and not waste people's time thinking that they have a chance for input.
I'd agree with that. We certainly don't have any, I don't have any disagreement with involving that. I think some of that comes with our timelines and how often those groups meet, and we can work on that and our need to kind of get through on some of these things, particularly the pavement management part of it and the rush to pavement management. We've been working on this for months. You know, we have been really short-handed ever since I came on board. Mm-hmm. And we brought an engineer in July. Greg had to get up to speed. He had to learn the program. It's a very complicated program. Mm-hmm. I estimate Greg's got 800 to 1,000 man hours in what you're seeing tonight, which we're appreciative of the city manager's office letting us spend that much time. We all think it's important for the long range, and I think we're going to recoup the money that we spend in staff time and that many times over. But that has come at an expense of some other things. And I think we're rapidly going to get caught up in some of those things, and we're happy to talk about it. I have no issues with taking these things to the Chamber or to BPAC. We have taken a lot of things through BPAC. I think more so maybe than the Chamber, but we have taken things to Chamber as well. Mm-hmm. If we have not done that adequately enough, then we'll work on that.
You know, Monty, this is not a criticism at all of the amount of work that is represented here. This was amazing. It was a ton of information. And, you know, I would just really like to see us think of a new way to involve these people, even not to taking this to them, but having them come together with us.
Well, I think so, and I think, Sherry's had some ideas and looked at ways that we can get input online, the process, and look at some of those things that I think are exciting. Particularly, we've talked about that when we get to the husband bike corridor project. We've with that consultant that we selected in negotiating the fee, they had a lot of money for the public engagement. Sat down with Sherry, and she said we can do most of that stuff, and we took that money out of that project or out of the fee, and intend to do that in house. And some of that'll be online things, and so we're excited about that. I think we're moving in that direction.
Great. Thank you.
You bet. So I am Monty Carnes, Director of City Engineering, and we are here to talk about transportation issues. As we've said, this is intended to be a study session. We expect a lot of back and forth, a lot of questions, and we're prepared for that. I'll give you a quick overview of what I'm hoping to accomplish. I want to briefly talk about the pavement management concepts. Many of you have heard that before, but some of this is for the people listening. I'm going to talk a little bit about typical project schedules, and that's maybe where we can talk about what you were previously saying, how do we keep things updated, and process going through that. That also ties in with our current status of the projects we have going. Then we're going to talk about the pavement management 5-year plan, then the capital improvement 5-year plan. I want to spend some time talking about the city-county perimeter road and some ideas with that, and then restate the recommendation that I just gave you. So with that said, I think we're ready to launch the PowerPoint. We just talked about that. Pavement Asset Management Program, as we've said before, that's simply to match the appropriate maintenance repair technique to the pavement condition that gives us the greatest increase in useful life at the optimal cost. So what are the things we do? We do a thin surface overlay. That's a picture of a microsurfacing. We're going to talk a little bit about another technique we want to start this year. Sometimes we do a mill and an overlay of asphalt. Sometimes we do reconstruction of the street, and then sometimes we do spot full depth repairs. Example of how this works, you will recall last summer we did a project from Sanger to Western on 19th Avenue. That street's fairly new, it's in fairly good condition. We had a lot of questions about why we were spending that much money on a brand new street. We came back and told you that over the life of that project, we estimated if we continued with this process, we'll spend less than $500,000 ever so often coming in and doing a microsurface overlay. That if we went back to the old way of doing things, that over that 30-year life, we might do one mill and overlay at a cost of about $400,000. I would remind you that Western from 6th Street to Virginia has not been touched since 1974 when I was laying out of school working on that project. That's how many years that's gone without anything being done to it. And we have other streets in town that have had that. So it's not far-fetched to say that maybe once in the life of that street we would have done one overlay on it. So if we had followed that, we would have spent $400,000. When we got to the end of the design life, we would have spent somewhere between $1 and $2 million to bring it back up to shape. So by doing the pavement management, we will have spent $100,000 more. The street will still be in the 80s, 90 range, and we will have saved $2 million, $1 million to $2 million. So we think that's the value in doing what we do.
Monty, can I ask a quick question here?
Yes, you can.
The pavement management program, I noticed, doesn't include pothole filling and that sort of spot, just make it passable kind of stuff. Where does that fall in?
That falls in the deferred maintenance. When we ask you for deferred maintenance, and we kind of make a judgment with the operations group as to are they going to take care of that with their funds, or do we make it into a project and do it with one of our own calls? And so that's a judgment call between our staff and operations.
Would that money be lumped into what we consider pavement management money?
When we spend the money from what we call deferred maintenance, that comes out of the pavement management, yes.
Okay, thank you.
How often does it go? Is it kind of 50-50 split? Does it go operations as opposed to your group?
I don't know that it's a 50-50. I think some of it's manpower. What can they do with their forces? A timeline. If it's something that, do we have to really get it repaired now? And which one of us can get to it the fastest? And other things are, okay, well, we can handle that. Maybe we've got a project already scheduled in the area. We do the full or deferred maintenance on what we call kind of an indefinite delivery contract. We bid the unit prices, but we don't guarantee a certain amount of work. We tell folks how much money we have to spend, and then we put a group of streets or areas that need some work in a package. We call that a work order. We issue the work order. We give them a timeline to get that done, and then we reevaluate how much money we have left after that. So sometimes if something comes up, we have a project in the area, we can easily add that to a work order and save operations, the efforts. Sometimes they'll be in a different part of the community, or sometimes we're between work orders and it makes more sense for operations to do the work.
So everybody, I feel like, has like their favorite or nemesis pothole that they talk about.
Let me make sure my pants working.
I wasn't going to bring one up. I just was curious to kind of talk through what that, if you have a nemesis pothole, what would a citizen's process be for getting that into that queue that you just explained to us?
So we have the SNAP process where they can go online and put that, and operations gets that, I get that, some other people, then we can track it and decide where it needs to go, and then we'll respond. They can also call me, they can call operations and email us, and we'll evaluate it and look at it.
Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah,
I said it's a study session. We're here to be interrupted and talk about it when you have the questions. So if we could go back to the slides. The pointer's not going to work. So if you look at this would be a typical curve on a project schedule. The vertical axis is percent complete or percent of time expended. The horizontal axis is obviously time. You look at the light blue line, that's time, and that's obviously going to be at a 45-degree angle. You see the total project line, and you'll notice it kind of goes off kind of slow. That would be, we're trying to get engineers on board. They've got to do some survey work before they can spend a lot of office time. They got some data gathering. We may have some public hearings, different things. And then as they go along, you can see the change in slope as they doing more work. Then at the bottom, you can see the construction line's flat until we get a construction contract. That can be as much as a year, 12 months, depending upon the size of the project. In the case of Perkins Road, several years. And then the construction starts off, it starts climbing. When you get towards the end of the project, you finally cross the timeline, and you kind of feel like maybe you're ahead of schedule based on your percent complete. And we do percent complete in terms of dollars spent, because that's one of the easiest ways to track it. So if you look at just the construction, you can see you kind of cross that line a little quicker and get ahead. You have the same phenomena with construction when you start out. When you start out, you can just add, start off to begin with, you got to order materials. You got to get all your bonds and everything in place. And then you got to put up your erosion control, and you can't do anything, so that's just one crew. And then you got to strip some topsoil, you got to do whatever you do, so you got another crew. And it's a while before you can have 2 crews and then maybe 3 crews. And you've got if you got some storm sewer to put in, or box culverts. You got all that work underground. You got to prepare the subgrade. So if you get a day of rain, you may lose 3 days. And so all that, you're driving by, you're looking, and it just seems like it's taking people forever. You finally get out of the mud, you finally get everything out of the ground, you get your base down, and you start putting the surface, and then you can see it starting to climb. You cross the blue line, and that's when you really start to make progress. But you kind of think somewhere you're driving along and you're going, gee, y'all, they've been working on this road forever. They got to be behind schedule, when in fact we may be on schedule or ahead of schedule. Any questions about those two lines? And if you've got any ideas how we can incorporate that into helping the public, I'm happy to look at that. This slide, yes.
On that question, I mean, do you guys have, at any given time on a project in your office, a % complete number?
We do not, but we're working towards that direction.
But on the engineering side, you would, right? And the engineering portion, because they kind of work off % complete, like plans and things,
we
right?
We have milestones for them, 30%, 60% right away, 90% bed sets. We have milestones for them as where they are. That's correct.
And I know that's kind of nuanced. Like right, a private citizen may not understand like 30% means they've kind of gotten this far down on, kind of the design. And it kind of has meaning, but maybe.
And we can define what that milestone is.
Right.
What does a 30% set of drawings look like? Or what does that mean?
Kind of how far you are, actually.
It means we've completed the survey. It means we've put in a tentative profile. It means we've got some tentative, maybe have tentative cross sections. For sure, we know what the typical section is going to look like, and we've made some base decisions on what we want it to look like going forward. 60%, you're starting to look at the cross sections, how things are going to fit together, what utilities need to be relocated, how much additional right-of-way you're going to need, if any, all those good things.
Yeah, and there's so much decision making and so much work that happens on the engineering side. I think we all kind of take for granted that just poof, the road appeared, maybe over a long time, but eventually it got there. But there's so much work that happens beforehand, and maybe as we help try to inform people about how dollars are being spent, we can also kind of inform them a little bit about the process that those dollars are being spent on. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we have to go crazy into the weeds of it, but maybe an opportunity just to provide some information.
Yeah. And as you know, if like the airport arterial project, we have some environmentally sensitive areas.
I do know about that.
Even though that's a multi-phase project, and those areas aren't into the final phase, we have to attain the environmental clearance on all of that corridor before we begin the first phase.
Auntie, that's the fastest part of the whole project.
Yes, ma'am, you're right. It is. And it's also the most fun and exciting.
I would like to interject that, I think that timeline is really important, and it would be wonderful to have an explanation of that, Monty. And I'm not suggesting that this is your responsibility, but I think this is our responsibility on the staff part. The project doesn't start at the start of your timeline. The project needs to start back here, informing public, getting public input, and how do we make that part of the entire project? And who does that? I'm not suggesting that you do that. Someplace else.
I would ask why we wouldn't. If we're the transportation group and we're in charge, and part of that's planning, why would we not do that in conjunction with developmental services?
Okay.
And
I think why would you not?
Some of that starts with the Stillwater Transportation Enhancement Plan, and some of the capital plans that we've presented come out of that planning effort. And so I would argue that you are on the right track, that the project, and that's certainly my view, the project starts way back when. Through my whole career, I've seen projects that have started out and then don't ever go to design or construction, but they were still a project. for various reasons. Maybe priorities changed. Maybe they went through design, they got to construction. I mean, at one time we were going to take 3rd Street all the way to Washington, and was pretty far along with that, and priorities changed, and that didn't happen. So yes, I mean, just because, well, I can give you any number of projects that I've seen on plans that never happened, long-range plans that never happened, but it was still a project.
Do you have time to do that?
We have all the time in the world when we're directed how to, what priorities we have. But I think we do. I mean, it looks like we're going to pick up some additional staff positions, and frankly, that's one of the things that I had wanted with that position was we could have somebody down in the weeds doing the nuts and bolts things, and then we could have somebody looking at those kind of things. So that I don't have to spend so much time looking at them because there's other things I need to be looking at. So yes, I think that does fit into my vision of what we would be doing, and I think we're going to have the staff to do that. It'll be the same with some of the reports. We're looking at picking up a part-time intern, and I'm hoping I can get a business or an MBA student that fits that as opposed to somebody else, because it's more project related, more financial, a whole lot of things, and I think it'd be real beneficial for that student to learn some of these things when they get out in the real world. So yeah, I'm kind of excited about maybe the direction we're going and what we could accomplish, and maybe head off some of the things that you're talking about.
I think too, what you guys do for us, and you kind of laid it out earlier, there is kind of nuts and bolts work, right? There's some work that just is housekeeping, maintenance kind of stuff that maybe the public might have an interest in fixing that pothole, but it's not a big planning effort, right? Hopefully to fix the pothole.
Yeah.
But then there's certain other projects where we're really investing a lot of transportation dollars. We're looking at alternative modes of transportation. I mean, I think that's where we really would want I would want for the public to have an opportunity to participate in some planning associated with that. But there's kind of layers to what you do, and not everything needs, I don't think, everybody chiming in. But there's definitely some areas where we definitely need to start engaging the public maybe earlier, so that they feel like that's a project I wanted and I participated and told you what I needed. And
And I know during the STEP update, and it's been a couple of years maybe since some of that happened, but there was a lot of public input into that and advisory groups. And I sat in on some of those discussions, and some of the BPAC people were there, some of the chamber people were involved with that. And we discussed a lot of these things, alternative modes of transportation, and in that document, and it's
Since you brought that up, Monty, the STEP plan,
Yes.
the original 2007 plan, it was updated in March of 2016. I think it mentions that somewhere in this.
I think that may have been when they hired the engineering firm to begin the technical part of it. I think with the change in staffing and developmental services, I don't think the document was ever fully updated. The engineering portion of it has been, but the overall plan of vision and some of the discussion of some of these other means, I don't believe that's completely completed yet.
So it has not actually been updated.
I think that would be technically correct. The engineering part of it that would go into it, we feel pretty comfortable about those technical parts of it. That's right. I think it's close to, I think it's just down to finish writing it up. And I'm sorry that Paula's not here because she could speak to that better. Okay, any other questions before we go forward? Okay, so Melissa talked about this a little bit. I kind of wanted to show this sheet. Obviously, we don't want to get down into the numbers.
Are there numbers on there?
and they're whatever I want them to be. It starts fiscal year 15, and goes through July of fiscal year 19. This upper part are the disbursements. Revenues are up in here, and then you kind of get to disbursements. You get to allocations, and then down here is planning. When I came on board, Christy said those top two areas, I can't have anything at all to do with them, that she controls that. The only place I've got is the bottom. So as Melissa said, in that bottom area, we've got a projection that finance comes up with how much money we're going to have. And then as we think about projects, we put them down in planning. That planning thing, we put them out and see how that affects the overall amount of money we have. This is where things like Perkins Road, that we knew we were going to have a commitment for right-of-way and utility relocations. We put money down there in the planning and held that in reserve, knowing that you were going to have to, you had a commitment there to honor and to make sure we had the money to do that when the time came, and then planned everything around that. That's one of the reasons why your fund balances will sometimes look large. You haven't allocated them, but you've made a commitment that you're going to spend them, and we want to make sure we've got the money when that commitment rolls around. So once you approve a project, then finance moves that up into the allocations. Those projects will always have contingencies in them, and we always hope that we'll have some of that money left. And so when we close out a project and we have contingency money left, it goes back down into the planning for us to be able to plan and go forward. So just kind of wanted you and the public to understand that we do take that money seriously. We take our stewardship of that money seriously. And part of it is we do look out ahead and make sure that when the time comes for a commitment, we do have the money for that commitment. Briefly, the current project status, and I gave you a spreadsheet. I'm just going to summarize that quickly here. Basically, we've got about 1.8 million of contracts and professional service. The 500,000 for the first year of the Stormwater Master Plan, which we're now calling the Stillwater Creek Watershed Management Plan, because it's more than just stormwater. And a quick update on that, we have selected the firm for that, and we're in the process of negotiating that fee, and they're putting together the scope. But that totals about 2.3 million. Construction, we've recently completed about 1.1. We've got about another 1.2 under contract. Of that, we've, as of March 31st, we'd completed about 800,000. We've got 8.5 million under design. Of that 8.5 million, we're projecting that by September 1, we'll have 7.5 million of that under contract. So, you know, I told our inspectors today, get your vacations in this summer, because, you know, we're going to be busy starting in the fall. So total construction is about 10.8. Your project costs are about 13.1 million. Any questions on any of that? I would ask.
Money.
Yes.
Those projects that you're describing that are current, that's all out of the half-cent fund.
And that's also some of the money that you appropriated last fall for the bridges, Western Street, the Husband Bike Corridor. It includes those projects as well.
Okay.
That sheet I gave you, the spreadsheet that had all that information, something like that. Yeah, I think I called it the capital reports. It should have been in your packet. It should have been one of the attachments in your packet.
I'm not sure which one it is.
I can't find it.
Well,
Is it this one, the 5-year transportation capital improvement plan?
no. It's going to look a lot like that.
Oh, it's way in the back.
Yeah. There it is.
Yep.
That
Okay.
if you don't have it now or we'll get it to you.
No, it's the
we got it.
last
We
page.
got it.
Yeah.
It's the last one.
Okay. Something like that is kind of what I'm perceiving to keep you updated on where we are. And I kind of that as a start, and you guys tell me if it's too complicated, too much in the weeds, or some idea of what you'd like to, what you'd like to see.
I really like what's currently on our website, and I had copied it off and I forgot to put it in my notebook, but we have a listing of projects, start date, when it was going to be completed, where it is in the process, what the actual situation was as far as what was being done to it. So I don't know if that's, this to me is a lot of
It's more
additional information
than you want to
than we-
have,
yeah.
and that's fine.
And we want to keep it simple for you guys as well as simple for the
Okay.
general public and for
Okay.
us to understand, so,
That thing is valuable to me,
sure.
but that does not mean it's valuable to others, and we can use that to maybe summarize it down to get what you need.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it's good information to have available, but having sort of a distilled version of this, where it's just kind of status and completion date.
Yeah.
And
We're
I
happy-
also think citizens are like, it's not Project 18TR01-E.
Oh,
it's-
we
Yeah.
would put the name on that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
And it is
yeah,
on the
I understand
website.
that. I do understand
Okay.
that. Yeah. Okay, so back to this, we are there. So, the pavement management plan, I've shown a slide here of 2 years of it. One of the things that I want to discuss is you'll see a line there for engineering/testing. As I discussed earlier in that project, how it may take us a year to do the engineering. And in the past, we've gone ahead and allocated the construction in the same fiscal year. So we're kind of changing that and saying, well, if the construction really isn't going to happen to fiscal year 2020, let's just allocate the engineering in fiscal year 2019. So the engineering in fiscal year 2019 is mainly for projects that will be constructed in 2020. Engineering in 2020 is for projects in 2021. Now, the exception to that for 2019, and could be in other years as well, you approved the CDBG grant. We would anticipate doing that in 1 year, so the engineering for that is in fiscal year 2019. We've also started to break these out by arterial collectors and residential, so that we have a feel for how those dollars are being spent. You'll notice that in the first few years, we're pretty heavy in arterials and collectors and not so heavy in residential. It's not saying we aren't spending many residential, we're just spending more in arterials and collectors. That's partly because, that's where a lot of our higher traffic is. We're still following our pavement management information that we have, and which of those makes the most sense. But we're also starting to look at traffic counts, how that plays into it. We may have a street that's only a block long that breaks down at the bottom. Do we really want to make that a higher priority than Duck Street and some of those types of things? So not that the folks that on that street aren't important, it's just how do we prioritize some of that? And so that's the intent, is we're trying to get the arterials and collectors up to a pretty good level, and then as you'll notice towards the end of the 5 years, we're really putting some money in residential streets, and we would expect that to continue. Any questions about that?
Monty, just for people that are listening, will you just quickly clarify what an arterial and collector is?
So you start with a local street, basically the street in front of your property, whether that's a residential or whether it's, it could be commercial. A lot of times commercial are not on local street, but they could be. Could be industrial on a local street. Then you have a collector street that funnels that traffic collect several locals, and then collectors then go to arterials, and arterials are minor and primary. Typically, a minor arterial would be a section line road, and then a principal arterial is typically your state highways. Principal arterials move people and goods between communities or from outlying into a community. So in that regard, even though we think of Western as a minor arterial, when you consider it goes all the way and picks up people from Perkins, Coyle, Langston, it really functions as a primary arterial at times, but we call it a minor arterial. But
So-
that's kind of how that system works.
Can you name some examples? So an arterial in Stillwater, for us, like a classic, like would be, besides Western, you just said Western, but
Hall of Fame would be a good one. Western to Hall of Fame and then Hall of Fame across would be a good one. Of course, Perkins Road would be a principal. 6th Street, State Highway 51 would be a principal. Portions of McElroy, certainly.
and then
And
a
then
collector would be,
A collector would be like 9th Avenue from Western to downtown,
okay.
something like
I
that.
think that just helps when you say we're going to work
Sure.
on arterials and collectors. That just kind of gives us a sense
Exactly.
of what roads you might be talking about.
Very good point. Thank you.
Do you have a map of the city that has
We
the
do
roads
have
by
street
color?
classification. We do.
Mhm. Colors that are easy to distinguish between, not like light blue and medium blue?
Well, I'm chuckling because earlier today when we were putting things together, I have a color deficiency, and they had all these colors, and I saw one color.
Yeah.
And so some of those are, since I was doing the presentation, we did it, kind of so that I could see it. So, but that is a very good point. And a lot of times I'll also want to see the lines in something other than color. I want to see maybe widths or dashes or dots, so that folks that have trouble seeing
That
color
could be
do
very
know,
helpful.
can see the differences.
Mhm.
Okay.
Monty, just an aside question. If you had all the money in the world right now, you actually couldn't move much faster.
Well, that's true. I'll go back in time. In the 80s, we had a period of time where we had a lot of cash, and at that time we needed $1 million. And the commission told my boss, okay, we'll give you $1 million. And he said, no, I can't spend $1 million. I can only spend about $300,000 effectively in a year. And they were kind of taken back by it, but it made sense. So that is correct. You have an infrastructure in place, or not just roads and water and sewer, but your people, that you're geared up to spend so much money. And if you're going to have a big influence, then from a management standpoint, you've got to decide, is this one-time money? And do we go hire a consultant? Let's say we passed a big bond issue. Do we want to hire staff to gear up to administer that, or do you want to go out and hire consultants to do that? If you're going to say, okay, we're going to grow and we think that we can add another $6 million a year to your budget, and we're going to do that in the foreseeable future, then we would look at, okay, how much staff do we have to add to adequately spend that money in a wise way.
I know 5 years out on this sheet, we don't know which arterials and collectors or which residential streets would be in this bucket. But at what point do we know, like for fiscal year 19, do we know specific streets that are going to have a mill and overlay or a mile service?
For fiscal year, for the pavement management, we're pretty far down as to which streets, and we have the summary page that has, we have them listed by street name and then by broken out by the classification of treatment that we're going to do and then fiscal years. So you could go and look at, okay, now let's just grab University Western to Monroe. We have that scheduled for a microsurface, and then we have it scheduled for 2019. If you go to 4th Street from Western to Ridge, we have that scheduled for a microsurface in 2023. Now, in all of these 5-year plans, you can always change them as you're going forward. The further out, the fiscal year 19, we're pretty certain that's what we want to do. We do feel good about fiscal year 2020. 2021, we're starting to get a little iffy. 22, 23, they're still just kind of, well, we got them there not just as placeholders, but right now, that's what the data would tell us. But we would continue to evaluate that going forward and say, okay, are those still the right streets to do? So next year, we won't have to put as much time in as we did this year. But next year, somebody will look at this and they'll say, okay, are these assumptions still valid? Is there new data that we need to consider? And what revisions do we need to make? And then we would bring that to the council and say, okay, we need to make this modification to the plan, and it will be a rolling plan.
Thank you.
I did want to talk about, highlight 3 of the things we discussed in the report. And I'm kind of pumped about what Greg and some of the staff did, Michael. We talked about looking at this high-density mineral bond overlay. They kind of discovered that. I was a little skeptical about it at first. They kind of convinced me about it. We think that has a real potential for helping us. It's primarily used on residential streets. You put it down on top of the asphalt. It helps stop the oxidation that occurs on asphalt, and that's one of the things that deteriorates asphalt is the sunlight and the oxygen breaks down the asphalt on the surface, and so it kind of greatly inhibits that, and so it drastically improves the life. Unfortunately, it is subject to abrasion, so trying to put on a collector or arterial isn't cost effective because the traffic will wear it off, but generally local streets have a low enough traffic that it doesn't affect them as well. The cost on that is $3 a square yard versus $4.50 a square yard for a microsurface. But the nice thing is you get a longer life out of it than you do a microsurface. And so not only are we spending less money, we're getting we're getting more time, which helps us in the future. So we're going to try some of that and see how that works. And we're going to hit a lot of residential streets hard this year with that are asphalt. Doesn't work on concrete, just asphalt.
So Monty, when you say residential, that based on this, would that be like a 4th Street or University, or are those considered?
We have in Westbrook Estates,
Okay.
we have those scheduled, some in Sanger Ridge,
Okay.
Eagle Summit Edition, the Berry Creek Edition, Countryside, Copper Creek, Park Street from 3rd to Virginia, Burdick from 6th to Maple. Those are the ones that we're proposing for fiscal year 19.
So those are ones that are in decent shape still.
That's correct.
It's not going to improve the surface. It's just going to maintain that surface.
Maintain.
Pretty much lock it into where it is. So there's a real value if we put down a new residential street. If you can get this down early, you really extend that. If it works, that may be something we want to look at changing our standards to, but that's down the road to talk about.
Good.
The other one you'll remember when we got the pavement assessment, and I told you that one of the good news was that structurally our pavements were in pretty decent shape. The bad news was that the ride was some of the worst that the company had, in the country. But sometimes rides, easier to fix, and that's particularly true with Portland cement concrete. So we're proposing to do some what we call diamond grinding of those. We would go in, we would do some spot repairs and some panels, and then grind the remaining. You've seen ODOT do that a lot in other state highways. They do that on the interstate, do that on expressways, they do it on some of the other other lesser traveled roads as well. That's $10 a square yard versus our other option would be to put an overlay on it. And that option's like $12.80 a square yard. So again, we're saving maybe 25–30% of the cost. But again, the main thing is an asphalt overlay, you're going to get about 7 years. They project you get 15, 16, 17 years out of a diamond grind. Other benefit is a lot of times you look at that and you think they're grinding it down smooth and it'll be polished, and you're worried about, okay, well, how's that's going to perform in wet weather? They're actually very small grooves that you're doing, so you actually improve the friction resistance while you're doing that as well and get a smoother ride. A third technique we're going to start doing is, in so many cases we have groundwater that's close and gives us problem with our subgrade, and then we get failures. And that's one of the issues on McElroy, east of Perkins. So there and some other areas we're going to come in and put under drains this year and get the subgrade dried up. And then the next year we'll come in and do the spot repairs and do the diamond grinding. And we see that, again, as getting the base right. We think that'll save us dollars when we come in to repair, because maybe we'll know better what the condition of the subgrade is, how it'll work. That could reduce our cost and how much subgrade treatment we have to do, and maybe the pavement thickness. Because right now we tend to err on the side of caution and make sure we don't ever have to come in again. So if 6 inches is good, let's do 8. And let us be a little more effective with some of our dollars. Then lastly, I did want to talk about the reconstruction project that we have. Is for Knobloch from Miller, the northbound lane going north, basically in front of the Catholic church there. OSU has a steam tunnel on the west side that has to be repaired and replaced. And when they do that, they have to take out half of Knobloch, and they're going to replace it. And so they came to us and said, you want to replace your half while we're replacing our half. It's a street that we would have eventually had to have replaced. It may not have been, as critical, but we have the opportunity to take care of it now in conjunction with OSU. And so we're proposing to do that as well. Any questions on the pavement management?
Does OSU own any streets
Do they own any streets? Mm-hmm. Yes.
besides Monroe?
They own Monroe. They own Farm Road. They own.
They don't own them.
Athletic.
They don't actually own them. They maintain them.
Yeah. They have responsibility for maintaining Monroe from University to Hall of Fame.
Okay, I'm going to argue, since I worked there for a while, if you go back to their original, when they were given the land, they're going to argue that they own it from when they gave the land. And we can argue about it, but
Mr. Dorman might argue about it.
I'd rather us figure out a way to work together.
Sure. What I assume your question, Pat, was around what's their responsibility to maintain and rebuild.
And they do maintain a lot of them as well, and sometimes we maintain them together.
Well, just on those 3 points you brought up around new techniques, I think it's great to see innovation in this area, given the fact that we don't have all the money in the world to spend, and finding ways to improve the longevity of these repairs for cheaper is great. So good work on those.
Thank you. Okay, then moving on to capital improvements. That list was developed primarily by me, based on, I have it as a place to start the discussion. Again, I apologize that we left the impression that we were looking for you to improve that tonight. It's based on things from the Stillwater Transportation Enhancement Plan. It's based on Sanger Road from a prior high priority at previous councils. It's based on listening for 2 years from what I've heard this council say, what I've heard folks at BPEC say, what I've heard people at the chamber say. And that's kind of how that was developed. And then we looked at some costs. I broke it out into two. Let me go ahead and put it up. I broke it out into two distinct things. One were arterial street projects, and the other are alternative transportation projects. The first thing I want to say, we'll talk about arterials in a minute, but the first thing I want to say on the alternative transportation projects on 6th Avenue, it was not the intent to convey that we would look at a bypass of town with 6th Avenue. Now, that may be something you want to look at. Typically, those would be things that ODOT would include in their scope of work when they would do something like that. There's legislation going through the legislature now that would require them to do that if they were to do a bypass. This was based on our conversations several weeks ago of how to look at the 6th Avenue corridor, and I'll address that some more in a minute. I wanted to talk a little bit about Sanger Road. We looked, as part of the STEP plan, we looked at Sanger Road in depth. We looked at making it a 3-lane. We looked at making it a 5-lane. We looked at making it 4 lanes. We looked at, if it was all of those things, what does it do to the traffic on Western? And can we delay any improvements on Western if we improve Sanger, with the hope that maybe we funnel traffic off of Western onto, or intercept traffic from the southwest to Sanger, get it to 6th, and not get it over to Western. And the models from the engineer said that would not help us that much on Western, and that 4-lane was the optimum typical section to have for that road. Yes, ma'am.
Are you reading my mind, Monty?
Just your body language.
We've had this discussion before, and I warned you that I'd bring it up again. What is exactly the problem that we want to solve?
Right now, it's the backup of traffic and the use of how many folks we have going to the school system, and the impact that has on the neighborhood. We back up traffic all the way down Sanger past 19th. We have people that will cross the double yellow line to try and get ahead to one of the side streets. And we get complaints of that. We get complaints of people parking in residents' driveways. I'm just going to be gone a couple of minutes, take my kids across the street and drop them off, and then people are trapped in their driveways. They have people speeding through that neighborhood trying to, they drop their kids off and then they're trying to get somewhere else. So it's an impact for the people in that neighborhood.
Will there be any changes with the changes that the schools are making, Sanger and the middle school, in terms of like their bus pickup and drive? I know that's all changing with the construction that's happening at those schools. Will that help?
I know they're changing. I know they're changing some of their bus locations, possibly, but I don't think it'll be enough to alleviate the need to do the project. You know. But again, I mean, this is something we can talk about and study and look at.
I think we should.
Yes, I do too.
It's an expensive project. I'm not denying
huge.
that.
And it's,
And-
I mean, that problem is 25 minutes, 45 minutes maybe out of the entire day. I mean, I work on Sanger Road right there at 19th.
So do I.
I drive down that road every day. And
I do too.
From 19th to 6th, I mean, a turn lane would be nice every once in a while, but, and a sidewalk would be great. I mean, the bigger concern I have every time I drive down Sanger Road is, I've seen a lady walking her kid on the shoulder, there's not a shoulder, on the side of 19th or of Sanger. So there are definitely problems there that need to be solved, but I'm not sure we want to design a $6 million project around 45 minutes of a problem at the schools. And not that it was studied, and I don't want to discount all that work that was done, but
And of course, it's not just the school; it's the other growth and the
Sure.
the traffic and everything else.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't have a problem with this having a lot of public input, and I'm happy to do.
Sure.
And I do think there's changes, like Sanger is improving their parking. I mean, that's always, my kids go to Sanger, I have one left at Sanger, and parking was always a real struggle, but I think the school improvements that they've made are increasing the parking there, which might help a little bit on the parking in people's driveways and maybe even parking in their neighborhoods. I mean, I understand if it was my house that they were parking in my driveway, or my house where they were parking in my grass or something like, I mean, certainly that would be something I would be concerned about. But I agree, it's the beginning of the school day, the end of the school day for a limited amount of time. And I've had several people ask me, more importantly, about how we get our kids safely traveling through
I was just
there.
going to say, it's also, a safety issue.
I've had more people come
Right.
to me about that than I've had about the traffic flow there.
I used to live across the street from Skyline School, and I made a little extra cash letting people park in my driveway. No,
I love capitalism.
I think supply and demand.
Exactly.
I think of in the idea of multimodal or complete streets that has completely disappeared. But multimodal transportation plan, it's an engagement of all the major stakeholders and talking to those schools. I mean, maybe we could even go in halfway on more parking lot, or would be cheaper than $6 million.
Yeah. I think we need to approach that problem from 5 or 6 steps back.
Sure.
Before we make a commitment to that project.
Again, it was a high priority in the past, so that's the reason put it in there.
I'm
But
sure you guys.
always happy we got to start somewhere and put them out. So.
Yes, sir.
May I?
Yes.
I just got to know, it seems to me as though we've got enough situations where we're looking at, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? What does the modeling software cost that firms use to input traffic numbers, and they can manipulate the street from 3 lanes to 6 or 20?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but again, we did model Sanger, so we could go back and look at it again. And I would think in any of this discussion we'd want to spend some money looking at all that, and because we're not going to have the staff to get that far down in the weeds, and we can certainly do that.
Okay, so do you have any idea what it would cost? I'm talking about the video modeling.
No, I don't.
Simulation.
Sorry.
The simulation.
The simulations.
Simulation.
Yeah, the simulations are going to be all not that expensive, and part of it depends on how, what level of detail do you want to get. But
Okay.
you want it realistic, or do you want it at a cartoon level? I mean,
But I think some
We can
of
find that
when
number.
you're looking at actual modeling, I mean, some of it you model kind of, I mean, if your goal is to move cars, your model will look a certain way. If your goal, I mean, your model kind of, I mean, if your goal is to move as many cars as quickly as possible, but I think there's probably some cases where maybe that's not our goal. I mean, I know that's what a street is supposed to do, but sometimes that's not the prime, like the highest goal on every single one of those streets. I know that's very counter to
Sure.
transportation
I think
planning.
just this tiny discussion here showed how differently, starting with the problem, makes, it may end up with the same solution, but it does give us a chance to examine other ways of doing things.
And I'd support that.
In general, on these 5-year transportation, the projects listed, Sanger, 19th, Western, those two sections of Western, and Country Club. Country Club 9th to 6th is really just like those last few blocks. From
Yeah,
the
it's 3
intersection.
blocks in there. Yeah, it's about a quarter of a mile.
But all of these are sort of widening, going from 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 lane,
Yes.
adding sidewalks and.
Everything, per your policy. Particularly anytime we do a new street, we always look at the alternative transportation and how do we accommodate those means. So yes, every one of those would have some component. Now, whether it's the right component, it's certainly open to debate. But we do have a component in there, and that's going to run 15 to 20% of the cost to put those in.
Well, I guess my question is, in this list, all of these are adding lane miles to the system. And I wonder why some of this capital wouldn't be, Duck Street, right, that needs full reconstruction of existing lanes, why we wouldn't want to invest some of that capital in the rebuilding of current streets rather than adding new ones.
And exactly, it's kind of that same thing as, do you want to add more miles to maintain?
Yeah.
Right.
And I have that, that's one of the reasons, I pushed on Sanger is, really, can we do it with 3?
Yeah.
And are we better, the other way? 19th, let's just talk about 19th, Country Club to Sanger. The section between Range and Country Club is 2 lanes. And I drive that frequently, and it seems to work. The section between Sanger and, between Sanger and Western's 3 lanes. That section of 19th certainly shouldn't be 4. I don't see why we do 4 lanes through there. I think your discussion is, can you make 2 lanes work?
Yeah, I don't.
And
I don't see why 2 lanes
put
doesn't work
wider
there.
sidewalks.
Yeah.
And spend your money there. So I certainly understand that.
Yeah, well, I would, if we're looking at 5-year capital improvement, I would love to see us invest $2 or $3 or $4 or $6 million in Duck and Washington and some of the existing streets that we really need. Full redos of.
Okay.
And this is probably a good conversation to also have with the Stillwater Chamber.
Sure.
Infrastructure, transportation, and a few members from the BPAC. This is the type of conversation that I think would be valuable for them to give input in as well.
And general public.
Yes,
I would
everyone.
love to see some, what do people feel are the roads around town that really need to be fixed? There's the potholes, but then there's the
Nemesis.
Then there, Duck, I think, is probably most people's. University gets a lot of play too, but Duck and if we've got this capital money to spend, let's spend it there.
So I'm getting the feeling that maybe we got it right on the pavement management, but you're not too happy with the capital improvement. Am I reading you correctly?
You are
I like
so
the alternative
intuitive.
transportation projects. But I think
you can create kind of this vicious cycle, though. We're talking about trying to maintain what we have, and then also adding. And I understand there is a pull, there is a tug and a pull based on our development patterns. Kind of what you need to do with those roads to maintain,
Sure.
comfortable and safe travel. But I think we also create this cycle where we're having to find more money to invest in new roads that we've built, and it just becomes the cycle that we already have trouble investing and maintaining what we have. It seems like, as a general policy, we should be looking at limiting those, like where it's possible, limiting those expansions and trying
Yeah.
to take care of what we have instead of creating more to take care of. I mean, I understand that that's not a perfect, you can't do that perfectly because we will grow and we do want growth, and that's good and happy too sometimes. But
I had a discussion last week with a student that's working on some of this stuff, and we had this discussion. And I told him, I said, basically, as a society, we're going through a transition of what's important to us, what isn't important to us, and it's a messy time. And it's basically folks are going to vote with their dollars, and so I'm okay with having a lot of discussion and looking at all these issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to see us, from a staff perspective, I'm sure you have other projects that could have gone on this list that have already been talked about.
My list is about $55 million.
We've seen that.
And I think Duck Street's on it, so it won't be a problem to pull it up.
So coming up with a process here to gather some more public input, to get some whether it's from organized groups or individuals, that sort of to talk about where we would want to spend this kind of capital money over the next few years. Personally, I would love to see it invested more in existing lane miles rather than in adding more. Again, sometimes we need more streets, sometimes we need more roads, but we got plenty we need to fix first, I think.
Okay.
could we do something where like the public, when you do public engagement sometimes, or a design workshop or a charrette, you'll have the opportunity to kind of put dots and stickers where you prioritize. Could we do that online somehow, where people could, place a red dot on the road they want fixed the most, or the spot that it's a really, from a planning perspective, when we do it from a planning type scenario, it'd be interesting to gather data that way from the public.
I also think we could probably use the flash vote if we had questions.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could do like a graphic with it that they could move around it, a red and yellow and green dot or something.
Many tools that you would use.
Sure. Mayor, one thing we've not talked about tonight, and I know that there's been some criticism that we are renewing a drainage plan when we had one some years ago, but the issue has become, we were discussing this today with Rob Hill, certain areas of town are built to 25-year storm events, and we had 6 25-year events last year and one 100-year event. So, and for instance, Duck Street, if I understand correctly, we need to know where to take that water, because those weather patterns have changed, and we can argue climate change. I'm just telling you that we've actually had those storms. So we need to know where to take that water before we tear that street up, and we're gonna have to put some pipe under it, I assume, and we need to know where to take it once we do that.
So are you saying then, correct, Norman, that the plan needs to be done first? Is that what you're saying?
On some streets, that we need the drainage plan back
stormwater
before,
plan.
or stormwater. I mean, Miller and Maine is a great example.
Well, I think that's important to kind of understand too. We talked about, I think this is our last meeting, all the guts that are kind of beneath the road, and kind of the other work that is auxiliary to improving a road, like a street like Duck.
Yep. And no one will complain or question that one on Duck. And
no one?
That was a bold statement, Vice.
Can you promise? Maybe 6%. How about 6%? I have a random question on
yes, ma'am.
When you're talking about capital improvements, project costs generally include utility relocations.
Yes.
I mean, I understand moving things out of the way of where you're putting the road. One thing that I've always wanted since I've been on city council since 2014 are new street light poles on our major streets. They look horrible.
We were discussing those today as well. So we know that. It becomes a balance between roads and poles.
So one or the other?
Well, where do you want the emphasis? And the idea is that as the roads are improved, so would the streetlight poles be.
Okay. So when the roads are improved, they'll be
Yes,
new
one
streetlight
we were
poles?
talking about today was I apologize, didn't mean to, the Perkins Road section will actually have powder coated black is what we're looking at this point, LED streetlights.
And that would be the standard for the rest of the city as we go through improving roads?
As the roads are done, yes.
Right.
That the streetlights would be replaced,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it would. And we will continue to look at materials and different materials, and powder coating is much better than paint, but it still would someday have to be refinished.
Thank you.
One of the issues with powder coating, and I'm a fan of doing powder coating, I think you just live with it. But one of the issues is if you have to replace a component of the pole, say you got to replace an arm for some reason, well, the pole everything's faded, and now you've got a new one up there, and it doesn't, it's new and it's shiny. But I think that's better than the galvanized steel looking at you, frankly. So I think that's also one of the things that we want to look at. It's one of my visions, is how do we start looking at replacing some of those poles or signal light systems, or date back to the early 70s, and maybe it's time to start looking at replacing some of those as well, and update them, and you may not do the street lights, but at least we'd have the signal poles. So unless you have any other questions about the capital improvement plan, I'm just going to kind of rip it up.
No, don't rip it up.
Well, although I would say I do want to talk about the 6th Avenue, give you a little update on that. ODOT has backed off the design contract, going to go back out, reevaluate engineers, primarily because the scope has changed, to make sure that they get the right design team. And I do think it would be wise for us to spend some amount of money on a consultant on our side, and that's what the initial $40,000 was for us to look at what do we think alternative transportation should look like in that corridor. How can we address some of the connectivity issues that we talked about several weeks ago, and have that person on board and working with ODOT's engineers as well, so that we can get that right. I don't know what right is. I put $1 million in there as a placeholder as to what we could do on either side. I still believe that there would be opportunities through some of ODOT's programs to participate in some of those costs. And so I do, it's not something we need to do this week, next month, but sometime over the summer, I do think it would behoove us to get a consultant on board and talk about those things in conjunction with that corridor. If you want to expand it to some of these other issues, we'd expand it to that as well, but certainly for 6th Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on the capital plan?
I'm all for the Camioca Trail connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
All of that alternative transportation stuff down at the bottom there, that stuff needs to be done.
Okay.
Just needs to be in the budget.
We have kicked Camioca Trail, that can, down the road for how many decades? I mean, at some point, we got to bite the
Just
bullet
needs
and
to be
figure out
done.
how we're going to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Lastly,
next? Go ahead.
Okay. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the city-county perimeter road maintenance. That dates back a long time, the early 80s. We had an agreement with the county. The city annexed section lines, de-annexed section lines. City limits have expanded. county commissions have changed, city governments has changed. I think the system we've got now really is cumbersome. You think about the folks that live inside the city limits pay a county sales tax for roads and they pay a city sales tax. The people who live outside the city and work or shop pay the same amount of money to two government agencies, and we don't have a real good plan of how we spend that money on our shared roads. So what we've proposed, and we've proposed this to the county and they were receptive to it, was that south of 6th and west of Perkins on the perimeter roads, we would maintain those. And the county would maintain everything else. Now that's the routine maintenance, fix the pothole, those kind of things. If any kind of improvement were required, replace a culvert, rehabilitate a road, we would share those expenses. The exceptions to that agreement would be east of Perkins Road on 12th to Jardeau, and then north from 19th to 12th. The city installed that concrete pavement years ago. We would continue to maintain that. If you go on north on Jardeau, you see a little bit of blue next to the yellow. Technically, that stretch of blue would be the county's to maintain, but if you go on the north side of Lakeview, there's just about that much that we would have to maintain. So rather than have that separated, it just makes sense we'd swap those. We'd take care of Jardeau all the way up to Lakeview, and then the county would take it the rest of the way. A possible joint project that we've got in the pavement management plan about 3 years out would be to rebuild Range Road, and we would look for the county to help us with that. The county was actually looking very quickly to grind Main Street, much like we're talking about, south of the city limits. And then if we approve this agreement, we would, of course, participate in that. And we've included that in our capital, in our pavement management plan that we proposed to you. If you're agreeable to this concept, one other thing the county asked for was, could we run our street sweeper all the way on Country Club up to Lakeview, because they don't have any way of maintaining that curb and gutter section and keeping it clean. And you know, we've talked to Chris, doesn't have any problem with doing that. So if you're agreeable to that, we're staff didn't see a problem doing it. But if you're agreeable to that concept, then we'll get with our attorneys, we'll get with law, with the county, draft some resolutions and bring them back for you to approve and for the county to approve, and then we'll have this in writing, an agreement of how we move forward.
So just to be clear, this map that we have is current?
No, that's
this
what
is
we're
the
proposing.
Okay.
I don't know that we could draft a map that shows what we're doing now.
That's what I was, okay.
I think if it totally streamlines the process
Yeah.
and makes sense for both the county and the city, then makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, some of these instances, we've got more city people driving down a county road that's not being maintained than the county has in that area.
This helps to,
And
this helps define it.
that's not a criticism of the county commissioner. It's just, he's got his priorities of where he's spending his money.
Sure.
And so that's our recommendation, that you approve the pavement management plan and the county perimeter road maintenance concept that we'll bring back to you for resolutions, and then the capital plan we'll do some more work on.
Pavement management for 2019? Or the whole
At least for
5 years?
2019, if you want to approve. I think 2019 is good, because the rest of it we'll bring back to you at a later date.
So that would be a motion to approve the 1/2 cent pavement management plan for 2019. And do you want two separate, I mean, that's kind of two separate things?
Sure. Why not?
or vote on one.
Or you just gonna, if you're just gonna approve it for 2019, then you just need one motion.
Well, that and
Well,
the
But
the
it has to go
motion
down
and
county
the county
road.
road.
We need to do a resolution on the county road.
so we don't vote on
So
it.
So we
you
don't-
don't
we
need a
don't need
motion.
a-
Okay, that's fine.
We'll bring it back.
Okay, okay. That's my motion.
So we have a motion from Vice Mayor to approve the half-cent pavement management program for 2019.
Second.
And now we have a second. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that is approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Monty.
you, Monty.
Thank you to
Thank you, Monty.
everyone over in your staff as well for the work they're doing on these complicated problems.
Close my book right there.
No idea where my agenda went.
Here you go. Ordinance, second reading.
All right, we're on item 8, ordinances on second reading. Ordinance number 3434, an ordinance related to the City of Stillwater hotel room tax, amending Chapter 39 of the Stillwater City Code, titled Taxation, Article 4, Hotel Room Tax, Section 39-271, Definitions, deleting in its entirety Section 39-276, Discount, and replacing with Section 39-276, Exemptions, amending Section 39-278, Returns, Section 39-287, Administration, and Section 39-289, Records Confidential, and providing for severability. Councilors?
Motion to move ordinance number 3434 to approve it, adopt it. It is already on second reading.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, adopt it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 3434. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the ordinance is approved. Takes us to item 9, reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B2 to discuss labor negotiations for the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge number 102.
Thank you, Mr. Dorman. Mr. McNichol.
If you were out near the airport this last weekend on Saturday, we had a full-scale exercise there, disaster exercise, and it was so realistic that even though in some of the radio traffic you say exercise, 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 and then you broadcast, a couple of TV stations called and wanted to know about how people were doing after that plane crash. So we
That's
want to
not
thank
funny at
all of
all.
our staff members and the partners who participated in the full-scale airport emergency plan exercise this past Saturday at the Stillwater Regional Airport. Full-scale exercises like this one help us network and work in tandem with our peers in the public safety and public health communities and with our airline and other government partners to better prepare ourselves for how to respond in the event of an emergency. And let's just hope that never happens. And we had a lot of the healthcare students from VOTEC that, or excuse me, Meridian Tech, that were out and role players. And I think we had a couple of hundred people out there all told.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know our
So-
students really enjoyed participating in that. They said it was very eye-opening to do that, so.
That's great that so many people took a Saturday to help make sure that we're
Because
ready
it started,
for.
that was all day. I mean, it wasn't, yeah, depending on 11:30, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
great. Counselor Zanotti?
I'd like to remind everyone that the spring household hazardous waste collection event is this Saturday, April 27th at the Convenience Collection Center. So get in your garages and your sheds and get all those things. You can bring items like pesticides and herbicides, mixed fuels, oil-based paints, pool chemicals, and household cleaning products to the center anytime between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. for free and easy disposal, and that's this Saturday. For more information, go to the city's website.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
We're very proud of our Stillwater police officers, and the Kiwanis Clubs of Stillwater are seeking nominations for the Police Officer of the Year. Their goal is to honor an officer who has demonstrated exemplary job performance and service to the community. Please send nominations to Karen Jackson at kjackson@stillwater.org. Deadline for nominations is May 1st, 2019.
Excellent. Thank you. Counselor Wedlake?
The Water 2040 Western Road and 32nd Avenue Waterline project is now complete. The project consists of 2.25 miles of an 18-inch water line extending from 44th Avenue and Western Road to just north of 32nd Avenue and Sanger Road. The project improves water service reliability in the southwest part of town, and the city greatly appreciates the patience and cooperation of all residents affected during this project. It is now complete.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you for your patience.
Councilor Jaloski.
Yes, you're invited to join us for a special block party at Block 34 this Friday to celebrate the completion of the wind turbine. Recognition of our donors, the OSU senior design students, and our project partners will begin at 5:30 p.m., followed by a ribbon cutting. Also, you can enjoy some free food, learn how to play bocce ball with us following the ceremony, and a kids' craft table will be provided courtesy of Prairie Arts Center. So I will actually be out there with the bocce rules and a bocce ball set, helping people learn how to play bocce ball. In addition to helping recognize all of the folks that made that project happen. It's a great start to the work that's being done at that block. And it's a great, I just love that we're going to have a block party. How fun is that?
Excellent. Thank you. I have this week's city statistic. The Human Resources Department partners with the city departments to hire, compensate, support, and create a workforce dedicated to delivering high-quality services. In fiscal year 2018, the department oversaw 2,029 job applications. See our current job openings and apply for open positions at stillwater.org/employment. I think that's it. Is there a motion to enter executive session?
Motion to enter executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, we'll now enter executive session. Thank you.